Japan, or no, maybe not. Was it Japan yet? Maybe it was. I don't know.
Japan, yes, absolutely, Japan, the
Okay.
great game in the Pacific. You remember this from 8th grade, history class, I'm sure.
Do not. Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs track by track. I'm J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our second season, we picked none other than pioneering indie rockers, American Music Club.
AMC.
J. William, welcome back. Now, we've had some discussions about whether that little stinger in the script, pioneering indie rockers, really is the right turn of phrase that we should use for them. I feel as though maybe you have an objection to the term indie rocker.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know if I
Come
have an
on. Just
objection. They were certainly indie, and they certainly rocked at times, and so, I think, like, you can call them indie rock, but, you know,
you
a Built
you
to
have something
Spill
else.
is also called indie rock, and I don't know
Sure.
that there's necessarily a
Mm,
lot of relation, except that they're guitar oriented,
yeah.
like,
So
but
we could say we've
AMC, they were so much more than indie rock, but,
So are you advocating right now for pioneering guitar-driven rockers? American Music Club? Is that what you're I don't think that's the right choice.
So, what if I threw out something? See, it's
Just
difficult.
throw it out.
All of these words, indie Americana.
Indie Americana. Americindie? Americindie. I just coined that phrase just now. You saw that moment of creation, that it was like
The
Genesis.
birth
It was like and then there
was
was like
someday.
Americindie.
Yeah, Americindie. Music historians will trace back who first coined the term
Okay.
Americindie.
So you think
Anyway,
Americana?
indie Americana. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay. Well, we'll keep woodshedding. We'll keep woodshedding. We'll see if we
Yeah.
can figure out something good here. But
Yeah.
listen, I don't want to spend all of our time here just
Mm-hmm.
chewing the fat about editing our own scripts. We've got to dive into side B,
Right.
J Dub, of the Restless Stranger, American Music Club's debut album.
Or as they titled it themselves, Side That,
Side that. That's
because
on the original
original
Grifter
vinyl.
vinyl. I still
Yeah.
can't believe that you've got all of this vinyl. Now, have you ever considered, selling this fabulously valuable collection, or do you think that this is some things just aren't for sale?
Oh, not for sale right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I've definitely had my moments over the years where I've been like, when am I ever going to listen to any of this vinyl ever again? And then we ended up getting
Of
a turntable, like one of those, standalone whatever, and
yeah,
that was enough for me to kind of like start pulling out, the old vinyl and
yeah,
trying them out and whatever. I just brought back a whole little Super Friends little carrying case for 45 singles, like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
packed to the gills with singles that were down in my parents' basement for the last 20 or
Wow.
30 years.
Wow.
And it was my original little case that I had back in the
Yeah.
day. And so I was like, oh, I didn't have time to go through it. And I was like, I'll just grab the whole thing and take it. I got back here and I started going through and none of them were my stuff. Like, it was a couple of my
Yeah.
sister's old ones. Some of them were my parents' old ones. Some were my grandfather's old ones. Like, it's crazy stuff. But anyway,
Yeah, well, I love it. I love it. See, when I moved from the mainland here to Hawaii,
right.
you really have to. Well, you don't have to, right? But it, it's a good excuse to kind of get rid of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you pared
Um,
it back.
I pared it back in the extreme, but I'm actually pretty regretful that I got rid of all my
Mm.
CDs. I never had a vinyl
Ah,
collection, but I got
yes.
rid of all of my CDs.
See,
everything, and there's
this is
so
so
much
good.
that is out of print, and I just like, it's like now I kind of feel like it's just getting worse and worse with Apple and all these people. Like, I just wish I still had some of that stuff.
I feel myself swelling with pride. I was just talking to my wife earlier. She was
Yeah,
like, she said to me just 2 hours ago, she was like, if it weren't for me, you would be a hoarder, like for real. And I was like,
yeah,
I thought about it. I was like, I would because, like, I have my space where all of my stuff is, and that's what keeps the
yeah,
peace in the house. It's packed to the
yeah,
gills with
yeah,
all of this crap. And so I have
yeah,
all the CDs, I have all the vinyl, I have all the cassettes, I have all
yeah.
the mini discs. I've got a million
Mini
mini discs. Yes, I went through a mini disc phase. So,
Wow.
it's ridiculous, but like when I hear someone like you say like, "Ah, I wish I
Yeah.
still had that print
I d
CD
I
or
do.
whatever." I'm like, "Yep, justified. I got everything. I'm keeping it. I'm never getting rid of it. This is gonna
Yeah,
be
I mean,
someone's
I got rid
problem."
of all of my books, every book that I owned, I got
Mm.
rid of, and, every CD, and I have to say, I mean, this was 8 se 7 or 8 year I guess 7 years ago or something, and, I remember thinking the morning of that garage sale, that fateful garage sale that really was kind of like tons of stuff being sold from the house, right?
Mm.
I remember thinking like, "Gosh, I don't who's gonna buy these CDs?" You know? Like,
Oh, yeah.
because it
There's
was
a guy.
before there was a little, it was before this little, kinda resurgence that CDs are having right now.
Yeah, yeah, they're starting to come back.
And, yeah, I gotta say, like, it they peop it I mean, people went crazy for them, and I had some real gems in there.
Oh, I know you did. I remember, I spent a lot of time looking at your collection and stuff, so I know you had some good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's all gone now, spread to the
But
various ends.
the thing is now, I mean, it's the whole thing. It's like with, streaming Spotify, Apple, whatever, like
Yeah,
almost almost everything that you can think
yeah,
of is available within seconds.
yeah,
And, it has really changed how, I mean, obviously, it's changed how everybody consumes music now. Like
yeah,
people don't, and so you know, I think the people who are still into vinyl and stuff, like, I get it. Like you want that more immersive kind
mhm.
of, you know,
Well,
experience, you know?
when you were talking about buying the album, The Restless Stranger,
Yeah.
and selecting it based on kind of it
Oh,
was in, like, the cutout bin and the cover art and
yeah,
stuff.
that was California. Restless Stranger,
Oh,
this
okay,
one was bequeathed to me by a
okay.
nameless
Oh,
friend.
that's
Mm.
right. But when you were talking about that, I mean, it really does bring back that was a huge part of how you discovered music,
Yeah.
was just kinda, if you were kind of a music fan, spending hours in record stores going through
Mhm.
stuff
Flipping
and
through
yeah,
every one, had to get
looking
them
look
all.
yeah, and I do kind of wonder if y I mean, clearly there's some kid out there with good taste in music, but I don't know
Mhm.
how that kid has developed this good taste in music because I feel like now, in some ways, it's easier to, discover music. Like, if you put on some, Spotify, play me more artists like this or whatever, it's not uncommon that you'll hear something that you haven't heard before and you kinda like it. But what I've personally experienced is that when that happens, pretty rarely will kinda make a note to go and, like, listen to every album in that band or musician's catalog, whereas if you stumble across, like, an album in a used bin at a record store and you really don't know anything about it, and then you discover, like, "Wow, I really like this band," there's already this level of commitment. You've already kinda consumed an entire album and committed to, like,
Mhm.
finding and so I feel like
Yeah.
you were much more likely to then kind of become a completist and really become a hardcore fan, not just a person who, is like, oh yeah, I heard that song once. It was pretty good. And
Yeah, and for me, AMC became like that type of band that I felt like I had to be a completist for. Like once
yeah,
I got, I found California and I was like, and then randomly they had Engine and I was like, oh my gosh, and so then it was like,
yeah.
I don't know, it was part of what drew me in, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like the whole completist thing. I really in those core years of music listening, I feel like it was more unusual for me not to be a completist. There were certainly musicians that like I took the position that these are the only good albums, these two albums, these three albums, whatever it is. And the rest of it's not worth listening to. But normally that wasn't because I didn't go and actually try to listen to all of that stuff and appreciate it. That was
Mhm.
kind of like a hard one, you
Well,
know.
when you became a fan of a band, it was like you had to kind of like own it. It became like
Yeah.
part of your identity. And I
Yeah.
think now like so much music consumption is feels more random, like not
Yeah.
necessarily passive, because I know, there are young people who are super into music and super into certain bands and albums and all of it, but
Yeah.
it feels like a lot of them, it's just a mishmash of like all different eras and all different styles and all
Yeah.
different genres, and not real choosy, like in
Yeah.
the way that I'm not saying that's good or bad. In some ways, I think it's great. Like I feel like, like my boys are much more open to everything now,
Yeah.
versus where I was super snobby and picky and I only like it if it doesn't have the, this keyboard, whatever. Like, and I think that's good. They're not snobby about, what their tastes are and what they
Yeah.
like to listen to, but it's almost like too easy. There's no hunt. They
Yeah.
didn't have to track
Yeah.
anything down. They didn't have to
No.
look through the bins or special
Right.
order, and import,
Right. Oh God,
like
order an import.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um so
I mean,
anyway, it's changed, like music
yeah,
consumption.
it has. But you know what? For now, JW,
Mhm.
we don't have to think about those changes. We just need to get in our little kind of memory freight train and head back because the year is what was it? 85 that this came out? 80,
Yes,
88, 88.
85.
No,
Although
88, right?
I'm still thinking about this weird thing about,
Oh,
all
85.
the sources say this came out January 85. And but then on the album itself, it says it was recorded in July of 85. So I'm like, oh, we may
How
never
could they
get to the
put it
bottom of
out
that.
before they recorded it?
Right. Like, were
Does
they
it seem
lying
possible?
when they printed up the artwork?
I mean, they're one heck of a band, but that seems like real good. If you're
Maybe they
so good.
wanted they wanted it to seem like they had like, we just
Yeah.
recorded this last night. Here it is, and like John Lennon with Instant Karma or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
I want to record it and
Yeah.
release it within 1 week. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Well, all right. So listen, let's get into it. Let's get it. It is side B or side
yeah,
that.
by that.
Track number 1. Goodbye Reprise number 54. It is 3 minutes and 56 seconds. Why don't we just give it a quick little listen?
Well, you took everything when you got away. Yeah, you got away. Idiot son's always trying to fall. Someone better nail that sucker to the wall. Idiot son is bored of tears. He's sailing on down to the sea. And it's a sea of misery. The princess, she's eating all
All
of
right.
her own hair.
Goodbye Reprise. Strange track,
Mhm.
JW. You want to talk a
I
little bit about the lyrics here first?
Well, first of all, the title, it's got this,
Yeah.
the Bob Dylan-esque number
Sure.
54. So there were
Yeah,
53 other versions of, this
that's
song or
right.
that, whatever.
That's right.
But honestly, the first 2 minutes of this song might be my favorite sequence
On the album.
on the album. Like
Really?
I always loved this opening, like, and I think,
Mm,
this might be something too that it if you experience it on vinyl, like
yeah.
you've just had a pause, side A ended, it ran for a
Mhm.
minute, you flipped it over and you started, and it comes in with this like just like a heartbeat almost like and it's almost this like little spoken word thing, and then it builds and builds, and then the last 2 minutes are this big
Yeah.
emotional thing. And so I really like that first half, and I think it is a preview of this is part of the DNA now, like of where
Yeah.
they're going, like that
Yep.
kind of like moody, kind of brooding like build. That becomes kind of part of their sound, I think.
Yeah, you definitely, I mean, as you go through this album, you definitely can find a few different places where it's like, that's the AMC that we're gonna that really is gonna be the one that blossoms, and it is nice to hear that. So I started with the lyrics here. It is an extraordinarily dark
Yes,
set of
very
lyrics.
dark.
Very,
Yeah.
very dark. Um, and pretty hard to track in a way that I think his later lyrics are not generally. So I do think there's, tonally there's definitely a lot of Eitzel there, but these are still fairly kind of abstract,
Yeah.
arty, kind of
It's
avant-garde lyrics.
yeah,
It's
it
not
seems
really.
it's addressed like he's, talking to somebody directly, but it's unclear what the relationship is there.
Yeah, and but I would say that taken as a whole, while I do think they're a little bit more abstract than I think some of his best lyrics, which we're gonna encounter later on. I think these may be my favorite lyrics on the album, and there are some very strange and very evocative lines in here. The one that I kind of put in my notes, it's not the only one, but I thought it was very evocative, was the princess, she's eaten all her hair. Very, very strange line, but it
Yes.
is somehow like
A
it's
creepy
more than
fairy
strange,
tale kind of thing. Yeah.
better than strange, but not, a, a, a not as good as some of the lyrics that I really, really love later on.
Yeah.
But I do some of my favorite lyrics on the album. Now the sorry, go ahead, J
I was just
Dub.
gonna say this. Yeah, I think these are more like this is more of like a poetic, kind
Yeah,
of, thing.
spoken word performance almost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And again, like this, this harkens back to kind of like AMC version one kind of thing. Like the more,
yeah,
the performance, was a huge part of
yeah,
who they are.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think this, feels like that.
yeah. All right, so musically, I found this one very interesting, and there was a I wanted to see what you thought about this. I think it mostly has to do with Voodie's guitar, but on my initial listens, I was like, gosh, it almost sounds like there's a baritone saxophone in there somewhere.
I think I know what you mean. I don't know. I know what you're talking about though. It does sound almost like a
Yeah.
it's got this like saxophone kind of like feel to it. And
It
that's
does.
why in my notes I said the second half feels like Springsteen. Like you could picture Springsteen performing this song. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
that's
wonder
funny.
if like I heard that saxophone and was like, "Oh, it's like
And that's
Clarence
what you were
Clemens,"
thinking.
like
It's similar because you know what I said? The sound plus there are some moments of a vaguely Chris Isaac kind of a guitar sound
oh,
with
well,
and it's another one of these 2 chord songs, just 2 chords, and
mm,
and then I and that like saxophone thing, I was like, God, it kind of reminds me a bit of Morphine, actually.
Okay. Well, before we get to Morphe, like Chris Isaac,
Yeah.
I propose that there is
Yes.
some kind of connection between this early AMC
Yeah.
sound and Chris Isaac's early sound, and they
Sure.
were both from San Francisco. And I
Yeah.
saw,
Yeah.
you may remember last episode, I referred to a GeoCities website that I found that
Yeah.
had a list of all the early AMC gigs, and they had like set
Yeah.
lists for some of them and stuff. And the thing that popped out at me was that at some gig in that, early or 85 to 88 era or
Yeah.
whatever in San Francisco,
Yeah.
they did a Chris Isaac song
Oh, really?
from his one of his first albums.
Really?
I can't. I need to find it now. Anyway, he
Yeah.
was from the San Francisco area, right? They were
Yeah.
from the San Francisco.
That's
So,
right.
the fact
Fairly
that they,
contemporary.
yeah, I do wonder if like Voodie's guitar
Yeah.
style, his sound and his style, there's some interconnected thing with Chris
Yeah.
Isaac's guitar player. I forget, Chris Isaac had
I
a really
don't I
well,
I
yeah,
don't know the name of the guitar player, but there is a whole topic here that I want to get into at some point over the course of the podcast, season 2. It may be something that we really just want to set an entire episode aside to discuss, and it would be amazing if we could get hold of someone who is actually active in the music scene in San Francisco in those days to ask
mhm,
some of these questions. But I was thinking along the same lines, not having to do with this song specifically, but more generally. And I was thinking about some bands that I think must have been influenced by Mark Eitzel. I am not certain they were influenced by him, but the number one that I think we've got to discuss is Red House Painters. I don't
oh
know
yeah,
that
yeah,
I don't know that I would make there's certainly some similarities in the sound of the two bands. They're both kind of slowcore bands. Red House Painters,
mhm,
definitely their early stuff was. Um, but the bigger thing for me was the highly, highly confessional lyrics, like kind of uncomfortably confessional lyrics. And
yeah.
then you know what other San Francisco band I thought of that was active around the same time, and I was like, gosh, I bet they were influenced by American Music Club as well. Counting Crows.
Or they say, see,
Yeah,
this is how like
I just
blind I
blew
am
your
to certain. I didn't know they were from San Francisco. They
I just
just,
blew your mind out of your face, right?
mm.
I'm
Well,
telling you,
yeah, I mean that like highly emotive,
extremely
confessional.
dramatic,
Yeah.
very confessional lyric. And I actually read that. In fact, this is after I had formulated this like theory. I read in the book, the American Music Club book, that at some point, I believe it was on United Kingdom, Charlie Gillingham, who is the piano player, keyboardist for Counting Crows, either played on one of the AMC albums or joined them for a gig at I
Mm.
can't I'm forgetting what it was, but he appears in the book. He, like, did some work with them, and was I think, prior to him being in Counting Crows.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, but so I've got this theory that, there is maybe a group of slightly later kind of bands that were in around in San Francisco, and probably as they were putting their bands together were like going to American Music Club shows, and I feel like come from this very similar super highly confessional kind of
Hmm.
style of music.
Yeah.
So maybe we can dig into like AMC, not so much their influences, but who did they influence, and how much kind of meat can we put on that bone?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because I'll have to really think about that because I think one of the, you know, sort of things I was thinking as I'm revisiting AMC is like, gosh, I just don't I can't point to bands today that I'm like, oh, they clearly, I
Yeah.
don't hear them name checked.
Never.
Because I still read, lots of music blogs and whatever, and so it's like
Yeah.
I'm aware of names out there and who's talking about what to an extent
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
indie guitar, uh, you know,
Yeah.
scene or whatever. And I never hear AMC
I
referenced,
know. I know.
and ultimately that's what we're here to right that wrong.
I know. Well, I really, I mean, maybe we can get, Mark Kozlik or Adam Duritz to come on the on the pod and really kind of reveal for us the dramas, the intricacies, the collaborations that were
I'm
happening
sure
at San Francisco in the late 80s.
probably like anything else, they're like, no, like none of that was happening. Like it was totally like chill. Like there was no.
Yeah. All right. All right. But we had both kind of identified this vaguely Chris Isaac-y thing.
Yeah,
Bruce, do you think
you,
there's
you
something
know,
about it, right?
well, it's this zingy, kind of wow. It's got a little twang, like reverby twang to it. Like I mean, it harkens back to like early country,
Yeah.
records and
Yeah.
and I think it's like a sonic way to kind of draw it like that. That's where the Americana like vibe comes from or whatever. It's like those little
Yeah.
touches.
Yeah. Well, but this is definitely a very interesting one. I came away from this song feeling like it is definitely kind of a prototype for where the band goes. It's one of the few prototypes on this album, but
Mhm.
it actually sounds a bit dated to me. I think just the
Well, the production,
yeah,
like the drum sound in particular, like this is definitely the most like 80s kind of feel,
yeah,
which at the time,
it was the 80s, so
it was yeah, and they were trying to get on radio. They're trying to get this, to kind of reach more of a mainstream audience,
yeah,
and you know,
yeah,
I'm sure that seemed like a smart move,
yeah.
But it would be interesting to hear it with like modern drum
I
sound or
know.
whatever,
I know.
like it would really change the feel of it, I think.
It would. All right, are you ready to move on to track
Yes,
2, Tell
yes.
Yourself? All right, track
Mhm.
2 is Tell Yourself. It is 4 minutes and 5 seconds, and I think we're just ready to just dive right in, so why don't
Yeah.
we give it a go?
I always sing when I get time. I always talk to people I can see. Yeah, I always take every opportunity. So tell yourself you're a strong man.
All right, well, first of all, this is not the first appearance of this song. If you go back to the demos, like this is one that appeared in the day,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it was already like like on the Restless Strangers demos collection that I heard. This one is the one that sounds more or less. It's the blueprint for the album version,
yeah,
But the thing that I think was a little jarring for me when I first heard
yeah,
this album, like especially because I heard California and Engine first,
yeah,
then I heard this album. And
yeah,
this has this like 80s dance kind of like groove to it.
yeah, yeah,
Like at the beginning, the way it starts with,
yeah, yeah,
dun, 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 dun. But the thing is if you go back and listen to the demos, they have a number of songs that kind of start
yeah,
that way with
yeah.
this like dancey bass beat kind of thing going, and then they kind of come in.
Now do you think that's kind of the Joy Division
Could be, yeah.
connection
I
people
mean,
talk about?
yeah.
Again, I don't really know Joy Division that well, but I
Well, and this is also like these were born out of a time when the band's playing live, like,
yeah,
and so
yeah,
they're trying to develop material that audiences respond positively to, and it's like if
yeah,
you're and audiences prefer to something with a beat. That
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
dance, that you
yeah.
can
Although
dance
I
to necessarily than, like the quiet, somber,
yeah,
they hadn't, because I think like their ability to deliver oh,
yeah,
an experience with like a quiet, somber, sad
yeah,
song, like that takes talent to be able to
yeah,
to carry a room,
yeah,
deliver a song like that. And so early on, I'm sure it's much easier to be like, let's just, play fast and we're gonna
yeah,
dance and
right.
whatever. And so like I think like, it took them some time to get skilled enough to kind of, deliver a lot of that kind of material, the dark material.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely felt the same way. This song sounded pretty dated to me, actually, and very new. What I wrote was new wave influenced. Is the way I don't know that that's really the right thing to say, but it felt
Oh yeah.
substantially different. And the other thing that kind of struck me about this one, it's not a huge deal, but there is kind of a chorus in here. It with a differentiated sound. The actual sound of the band is differentiated. There's a different feel in the chorus.
Yeah.
It actually is one of the few examples on this album, in my opinion, of it starting to sound like a song. And I don't mean that I'm again, I don't wanna dismiss songs that don't have traditional song structures and things like that. I'm okay with that as well. But I do think that Eitzel becomes kind of a I'm maybe gonna oversell it here, but at his moments later on in the career, he is a real kind of, I think, traditional pop songwriter in the style of kind of a Burt Bacharach. He doesn't, the atmosphere, the tone of the songs are obviously substantially darker and different than a Burt Bacharach song, but like
Right.
he becomes much more of a, I would consider him in the same category as the, Elvis Costellos, these kind of musicians that really think of themselves as kind of songwriting craftspeople,
I like,
crafters.
more like lyrics are important, the lyrics
Yeah.
are poetry, like they're not just,
Yeah.
I don't know, fluffy pop lyrics or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one you can definitely tell like they saw this as a potential kind of like hit
Hit.
single kind of thing,
Yeah.
like they wanted this to be like a really strong, potential single, and they worked it, and you can hear that in the demo as well. Like it's more distinct with like, here's the verse, here's the chorus,
Yeah.
it's gonna build like this, and
Yep.
you know,
Yeah. And the lyrics on this one, I felt like had a much stronger sense of purpose than most of the lyrics on the rest of the album. It feels to me like this is a song that is to a person, like an actual person. Whereas a lot of the songs on the album really kind of weave in between this avant-garde, just, evocative phrases towards more of like generalized emotional screeds. I don't and these are kind of negative terms. I don't really mean it that way. They're a little bit more stream of consciousness. This one actually felt to me like he was writing a song to a person, but I couldn't figure out who. What I seem to think is that is he is somehow expressing anger towards someone who's getting married, which is evidenced in the line, "We'll throw the rice," but is
right.
somehow betraying Eitzel, and Eitzel is cheering in the end of the song. He seems to be cheering for the bride's unhappiness, but it's unclear to me, just based on a reading of the text, who it is that I don't know that he's writing the song to the bride or to the groom of the bride or to some other person, but I do feel like this is a message song to a person that exists. That's my theory. Do you buy it, J Dub?
Well, definitely the line about you throwing the rice. I mean, clearly that
I
conjures
would
a
hope.
wedding
I mean, if it's
Yeah.
not a wedding, then it's a very, very volatile dinner at a Chinese restaurant.
I don't know. But I don't know, I mean, I assume his songs probably are a message in some way or another to a specific person, or I don't
You
know.
think that?
I could be wrong.
Yeah. See, I don't. I don't. I think well, there are songs that you write that are expressions of your own feelings.
Right.
There,
Mhm.
all right. Here, I'm off the
Well,
top of my
here,
head.
okay, the one other thing I
Yeah.
also thought when I was, I always sing when I travel. I always sing when I kill time. I always talk to people. Well, I don't know about that one, but I always sing when I travel. Like, I
Yeah.
thought of as like, he's commenting on being in a band.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna have to disagree on this one. You're gonna have to do some woodshedding, I think, and
It could
really dig
be
into
that
these lyrics.
he met somebody while they were
Could be.
touring and then found out that person was getting married and he was upset about it. This is my best
Could
guess based
that
on
could
a cursory read.
Okay. Well, listen, I think we're gonna have to turn that one over to the listeners, see what they think. Why don't you just hear what both of us have said about these
Oh,
lyrics, read them for yourself, and then hit us up. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button on Instagram, Backtracking Rocks ROX. Hit
If
the fucking
if you like
recommend.
20 to 30-minute discussions about single songs off of American Music Club's first album, this is the podcast for you. You got to smash that subscribe button.
All right.
Um,
So
Now,
okay.
the other thing I wanted to point out about
Yeah.
this song,
Okay.
"Tell Yourself," which, in case the
Track
listeners
two.
have lost track,
Side B.
um,
Track two, side B.
this is an appearance. You can hear what sounds like a mandolin kind of
Yeah.
strumming in
Yes.
the background, like as part of the kind of descending
Yeah.
verse thing.
Almost it was
And
almost like mandolin rain.
sure, like I think I talked about how there was something in one of the earlier songs on track or side A that reminded me of Bruce Hornsby.
Yeah, look at that,
There was
actually,
something
Bruce
about
Springsteen. Yeah,
um
but yeah,
so my guess is that for some reason I thought that Danny Pearson was the ando
I
player.
believe that he did play I believe that he did play mandolin on this song, right?
So I wonder if this is sort of like, if him and Voodie came from that country rock world.
Well, well, I am not I'm not 100% certain, but my recollection is that at least Voodie had played in a country rock cover band with Bruce Caffin, which is how
Oh,
he
okay.
became eventually involved with American Music Club. And I also know that Pearson joined the band through Voodie. It's possible I have to go back to that book and read it. It's possible Pearson was in that band or one of those bands as well,
Yeah. So I wonder,
which would make
like,
sense, right?
yeah. So now you've got, two guys that have that country rock background. And so that's even further evidence that they cross paths with the Chris Isaac universe, because
Yeah,
how many country rock
yeah,
scene San Francisco at that time? I don't know. But
yeah,
oh, so I feel like a little touch of that, but it stands in contrast to, it's a weird song sonically, I think, because you've got like 80s style
yeah,
sort of drums and stuff, but then you've also got like this folky kind of mandolin, and it's just
yeah,
I don't want to call it, not weird, but just like it's distinctive, but you know
yeah.
anyway.
And just something just occurred to me that clearly very unconnected bands. But when did the first Uncle Tupelo record come out? Must have been about what 88 or something,
I want
or
to say
would it have been
89.
more like 89?
I think
Okay,
89, but they were all, they were touring and they were making the rounds like in 87, 88.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I interesting. Yeah.
you
Oh,
know, but
I bring it up because I'm kind of like there was this younger generation of bands that were active in the late 80s who really they kind of were forerunners of alt country or whatever you want to call that thing that happened in kind of early 90s.
Yeah.
But I wonder what was the band, what were the albums that inspired those bands to kind of move in this direction? Or
Well,
was there some common source there?
join us for season 3 of Backtracking. Uncle Tupelo. I'm about to launch into a giant
Uncle Tupelo.
soliloquy on Uncle Tupelo, and I don't know if that's appropriate for
Well,
side B
no,
of American Music.
listen, I think let's stick with it for now, but we'll bookmark this and maybe maybe we'll do a special episode that's kind of influences and influenced, what was happening leading on into American Music Club, and then what did they leave in their wake, and maybe we can hit on, some of these contemporary bands like Tupelo.
I have a train of thought that I want to follow or I want to research. I haven't done all the research.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
like West Coast alt country-ish, Americana-ish
Yes.
bands and sounds in the 1980s. Like,
Yeah.
there were bands like I see Green on Red was like this band that had country rock leanings, but they were clearly alternative indie, whatever.
Yep.
And then you have bands like Camper Van Beethoven, who had a prominent violin kind of going and did flat out folk music,
Yeah.
in between indie rock kind of things. So I could be wrong, and probably am, contend that there was like this West Coast, country friendly alt indie thing going on.
Yeah.
And Uncle Tupelo's thing was Midwest, more like Heartland rock.
See, it's interesting. So do you think, and I don't know this to be true or not, but I wonder how much of, if you think about that time, really it was just, let's say these guys are all in their early 20s when they're writing these songs and kind of expressing whatever it was that influenced them. So, 10 years prior to that, we're in the early 70s to mid 70s. They would have been in their mid teens. Great time to start being influenced by music. And of course, you've got, especially in California, bringing up California, you've got Eagles, Flying Burrito Brothers, you've got Graham Parsons, right? Like, I mean, you have a whole thing happening out in LA, right? With this kind of country. I don't know what you'd call that, but I'm sure there's a name for whatever.
Country rock or country pop, like the Eagles, and all of that. What do you call it? The Valley. What is it?
Yeah.
Laurel Canyon.
Laurel
that
Canyon.
all of that
That's right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then in the early 80s, LA, there was the whole Paisley Underground, where it was the bands that were trying to sound like psychedelic bands from the 60s. The Rain Parade and
Sure.
and even like the early Bangles, I guess, were kind of like more leaning that way, and then they kind of became more like
more pop.
more pop, like polished. But Mazzy Star,
Sure, of course.
David Roback came out of that Paisley Underground scene, and that was like, because
Rain
you had
Parade,
brought them
right?
up, Rain Parade, and then Opal, and then Mazzy Star, and like, and they had that like somber, funereal, Opal, and then Mazzy Star, and so that was all happening down around LA, kind of, roughly overlapping with this AMC scene going on up in San Fran. I don't know. It's interesting. Like I'm sure if we dug into it, we would find little connections and ties,
There's too many
between
threads.
those.
How do we look at all these threads? We start pulling on one of these threads. All of a sudden, we're doing a taxonomy of all rock in America.
This podcast has been going for 15 years. We're on side 2 of Engine.
I thought covering all 19 Rush records was going to take a long time. I'm starting to feel like that's going to be a little amuse-bouche for this.
You chose the wrong partner for season 2 of Backtracking. Mark off your calendars for the next 5 years.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so should we move on from Tell Yourself track 2 to When Your Love Is Gone, which is
Yes.
4 minutes and 19 seconds. Track 3, side B, The Restless Stranger. Let's get it on.
Where do all the lonely children play? There must be some place where I can stay.
Okay, I want to dig right into the lyrics here because I am going to make another assertion to see if you bite. I'm getting a slight sense that this song is about his mother. Now, could be a little bit too Freudian, but we do know that he had a fraught relationship with both of his parents, but it seems as though there was there were some real issues that he carried around that related to his mom. Do you believe it?
I'm giving a quick read right here
Okay.
because I read through it, when I was listening, I read, but like I'm trying to remember again. I guess I didn't get mom vibes.
No.
I got
Okay.
more like love interest
Love
vibes.
interest. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay.
But
All right. You're wrong on that one. You're wrong on that one. But that's all right.
I'm sure we're both wrong.
Oh no.
One Can't we just agree to both be wrong? Little children, yeah. I mean, well, so I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine as far as what his intent was with the
I'm actually
lyrics.
going to make the assertion that my guess is better than yours. Better. It is a better guess.
You do you. What I would like to talk about is,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
here's another 1980s LA band who's, I think they're an LA band. I could be wrong. Well, the readers will let us know, right?
Okay.
Motels. Do you remember the Motels?
Ooh, I do remember the Motels. I am not an expert in the Motels, but I remember what wasn't their big hit, Only the Lonely?
Yeah, Only the Lonely and Suddenly Last Summer. Those were their two
Suddenly
kind of
Last
like big
Summer. That's
hits.
right. That's right. Okay.
And their whole thing was they created this mood, it was this sultry, like West
Yeah.
Coast kind of like mood. And I feel like I can, like, that's what the production on this one, again with the prominent, that keyboard forward kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it creates this very dreamy, almost like or like Berlin, Take My Breath Away kind of like
Yeah.
vibe.
Yeah.
I'm,
New
and
Romantics. Do we
yes,
call that New
yes.
Romantics? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't, yeah, you know,
You're not sure
I
whether you
I thought New Romantics, and again, oh my God, like
thought it was like
I thought it
only
was
a
like more,
London thing?
it was like a British like Spandau
Yeah.
Ballet,
Sure.
Duran Duran,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay. All right.
it's a lush
It
but
is.
sort of, fakey
Yeah.
keyboardy sounding kind of
Yeah.
sound.
Yes. Yeah, it really is that. I mean, I brought it up previously, but the production style, I think you're right on here. But it really is this incredibly clean recordings with a lot of reverb. You know what I mean? And not like
Mhm.
room reverb, right? I mean, this is like
Yeah, sort of
reverb, you know?
fakey sounding reverb, I guess, like from the
Yeah.
80s or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's somehow reverby without any warmth, right? There's just no warmth in the recordings. And I
Yeah,
do
they
think that
feel
that's kind of a hallmark of a lot of stuff in the '80s. There's just not a lot of warm recordings.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked last time about how like this was set to be first record issued on Malin's label,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's recording the album. This is a calling card for his
Yeah.
studio, for his, and so I do think that there probably was some motivation here to like, we've got to get this so that it sounds, like it could be played on pop radio. And
Yeah.
so, I
It
think that
really is
that
like, yeah, listen to what I can do on this song. I can make you sound
Mhm.
like, the Motels, or I can make you sound like,
Right,
right? Um,
like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm
yeah,
not saying that was his main motivation. I'm sure it was,
no,
he wanted, he loved the band and he wanted the band to sound as good as it could, and
yeah.
but I just have to wonder.
Yeah, so this one on the music. So the keyboard is obviously a one of the things you've got to comment on. It is, again, I this is not something that you're going to hear from me over the course of most of the episodes, because I just don't think this is true for many of the later albums. But this is a very dated sound.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a
yeah.
very dated sound on here. It doesn't hold up real well. But I do get the sense on this track that the band is working really hard to shape this into a more traditional song. I don't think they're succeeding, but they're trying to impose. It feels to me like they're trying to impose kind of a verse chorus structure over the vocal line, and over a vocal line and a lyric that just kind of doesn't really have one. It doesn't really afford that. But it is but I do think the band is trying to figure it out. I also, when I was listening to this song and thinking about that structural thing, this was really one of the places. I've said this before. I think Eitzel evolves into a more traditional style of songwriter, but a real kind of pop song craftsman in a lot of ways. But he starts out in this place where it's just there's, one or two, maybe three chords, no real structure to the songs. They just go. And you know what it reminded me of? Will Oldham. The early Will Oldham stuff has that same characteristic, where there were songs that had more traditional kind of structures, but you know, a lot of song fragments and a lot of strange
Yeah.
structures. But then much later stuff, I mean, he really moves much more in this direction of being a more traditional kind of country kind of songwriter, right? More
Yeah.
traditional song structures.
The other weird band that jumps to mind is a band who doesn't necessarily sound like American Music Club, but a band that I also loved. Season 5 of Backtracking. The Blue Aeroplanes. Do you remember the Blue Aeroplanes?
I remember that you love the Blue Airplanes, but
Yeah.
I have to say I don't think I've ever heard them.
Well, they were like this British, there were like a million of them on stage. They had a full-time dancer, but it was all guitars. And but their lead, you know, quote unquote singer was this guy that was more like a poet, more of like he had more of
Uh,
like a beat poet sort of delivery. Like he didn't really
yeah.
sing. He kind of like, but a lot of his lyrics,
Oof,
you
this
know,
sounds awful to me. This is just sounds this is
hey
not up
man,
my a dancer and a
listen,
beat
you
poet.
you
It's
can
not.
take that season off. I'll find someone else and we'll do Blue Airplanes Backtracking. But
If there's anybody out there who likes the Blue Airplanes, or
it's gonna be me
perhaps the
and
dancer, you should do it with the dancer.
right. I can't remember his name. But anyway, they were trying to take, these free form poems, you know,
Yeah.
and kind of cobble them into something that resembled, a chorus verse or verse chorus bridge, whatever, structure. And I sense that same tension, like in these early American Music Club songs, like where, they probably, they got a jam going, they got kind of a couple, groove going, and
Yeah.
he's just delivering stuff out of a notebook or whatever, and
Yeah.
and it took them, a long time to kind of get that lassoed in where, and probably later on, I'm assuming, once this is like a going concern and this is your
Yeah.
career,
Yeah.
like you have to kind of, find ways to be more efficient. I think like,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure he started writing with chorus in mind, but at this point, and these some of these songs, it doesn't feel that way yet. It's still like open mic
Yeah.
night, deliver in the freeform poem kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny though. It's really fun to hear kind of, you know what I mean, those moments of it. It really, this is a more generalized comment about this album. It is an it is an album that I don't think is all that good. Right? It is an album that I think is not all that good, but I love listening to, you really can feel them trying to go in a direction on this album, and I love that. It really is this kind of very interesting, like, sometimes there are albums that are earlier albums and they're just they're fine, but you don't really get much of a hint of where the band is trying to go, and so it just kind of feels a bit meh. In this one, there's like, wow, they're really trying to go in a bunch of different places and trying to figure it out here.
Well, and honestly, like you've got to go and like go through those demos like that are out on YouTube for this album, because there are a couple of styles on those demos that you're like, what? Like there's a version on there of oh shit, which one is it? Um well, first of all, it opens, the demo collection that I found opens with this song called Blind Girl. That,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it sounds like an 80s like pop dance kind of like hit, like
yeah.
it's got like a real, radio friendly pop sensibility to it. And then oh well, we're going to talk about Broken Glass. Well, okay, we'll get to it.
We'll get to
because
Broken Glass.
yeah,
All
okay,
right.
so let's talk about the next one is Heavenly Smile.
Yes.
So this ties in with like the demos, because version that is on the Restless Stranger demos of Heavenly Smile is completely different. Like it's more of like, it actually sounds like it's like CCR. It's like Creedence.
Yeah.
Like it's Chuglin.
Yeah.
It's like this country rock, like kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
relentless, like up tempo thing, and I actually prefer it to,
Oh, really? All right. Well,
yeah,
listen,
the
before we
version
get
that's
too deep into it, let's listen to the album version
okay.
right now. Heavenly Smile. It is 1 minute and 59 seconds. So it is a quick little nugget here. But let's just give it a quick listen.
Well, I always walk tall. I got a board in my back. Like I'm about to fly, or I'm about to attack. So ain't it a pity? Oh yeah, ain't it a shame? My name is not in your book. I got a heavenly name. I got a heavenly name.
All right. Heavenly Smile. There it is. Now, JW,
So-
you were saying that you prefer the demo version.
Yeah, so and I'm not arguing that the demo version would have worked better, because I think the thing about this song is, again, it's one of these weird curveball like genre things that happen on this album where you're like, what? Like um and it's a super competently played, like sounds
Yeah.
kind of like off a
Yeah.
hee-haw kind of, like
Yeah.
country folk picking
Yeah.
kind of version.
Yeah.
And that is a direction that they could have gone in. Like
Yeah.
clearly, like, Eitzel could deliver it in sort of that more kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, hillbilly kind of persona or whatever. And but the version that's on the demos is just this straight ahead chugging country rock. I mean, it's the same song, but like style is different. And I feel like there's something about that chugging up tempo version that I feel like could have maybe fit on the album, better than this version, because this one's such a curveball. I mean, coming after When Your Love Is Gone.
It's a very difficult album. The sequencing of the tracks on this album is decidedly strange. And
It had to be a fight. It had to be a fight, because there's so many different styles that just don't neatly
Yeah, and
follow one another, you know?
I mean, I don't know what would have been a better way to track it because if you grouped songs that had similar sounds together, I think the album would have sounded even more disjointed. It would have been like, this is like 3 different bands. You should have just had 3 different bands, you know?
Stay tuned for Jay Williams' revised edition of The
I
Restless
love it.
Stranger.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. All right, so for me, the I'm gonna talk about the lyrics a little bit on here. One of the few examples here of a more traditional chorus in the lyrics, right? There are these lines with the word heavenly in them that are repeated twice in each line. Each time that those 2 lines come, those heavenly lines come up, it's a slightly different version of the line, but that's a very traditional kind of lyrical um, uh, trope, I guess. And you can read these lyrics and see that there is more of a verse chorus structure in here than maybe in any of the other lyrics on the entire album. Um,
Mhm.
Even a song like "Room Above the Club," which I think it again it is maybe one of the most fully formed of the songs on here, but still is not a super traditional structural song. So I like that about the lyrics. I love the what I think of as progression that you see in that. I really I like these lyrics.
Well, I don't know if it's progression or not because I think that this is another one that shows up on one of these, or I saw it on, I think, the list of like demos and whatever bootleg recordings that are out there. Like this one showed up on one of those recordings and it said that it was recorded with Greg Bonnell, I think, or on that
Okay.
demo, the demo for this
Okay.
song or something. And
Okay.
so that made me think like, oh, maybe this one kind of dates back to,
But
you
yeah, it could
know,
be.
AMC version 1 or,
Yeah.
who knows. But I don't know,
Yeah.
like it does, yeah, it definitely feels like more conventional, I guess is how you could say,
Yeah.
like the structure
It
of
is
it feels more
more.
like it resolves it, like just everything about it kind of feels more like easy to digest.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and musically, this I probably am making this mistake in that I'm kind of like when I listen to these songs, I think about like, God, did anything like this? Is this a prototype for anything that ever shows up later in their catalog? And this one, without a doubt, reminded me like when I was thinking that I was like, well, Crab Walk. This feels like
Yeah.
a proto Crab Walk off of Crab Walk. I think is off of Everclear.
Hmm.
Um, so it's goofy, but I personally like how cleanly executed it is, and it does not sound dated at all to me. Now,
That's true because it's all
you can
acoustic. Yeah. Recorded
debate whether
cleanly.
it makes sense for them or anything, but I actually feel like this song feels like it could be on some contemporary album. It just it did didn't feel dated at all, and I think quite a bit of the stuff on this album does. I have to say, I think this is a gem on the album. This was a total surprise. I loved it. I was like, I maybe saying
I
loved
don't
it is
dislike, yeah, I don't dislike the song. I just like way that it sticks out like a sore thumb a little bit, like from production wise, especially on this side too, which is so, you know, I mean, it feels more 80s, it feels atmosphere, like the keyboards are
yeah.
more, and then this one, kind of like is
No,
just in the middle.
it is totally a throwaway on this album. It is just a total oddball in the same way that like Crab Walk is, right? I mean, it's just a total throwaway, but I guess what I would say is like, I don't know that I would advocate if I was, teleported back to the 80s and made the producer of this album and was kind of working with the band on what tracks should be included. I probably would not argue for this song to be included on the album because it is such kind of an oddball. But that is not to say that I think it's in some ways, I think it's one of the best realized songs on this album. I
Mm.
don't feel as though something's
This is a
missing
song.
from it.
and this particular version of it is probably something that they could not have delivered a couple of years prior, because this is like some, I don't know if that's Voodie like doing
Yeah.
the lead guitar part or whatever, but I mean, like it
Yeah.
requires some
Yeah. Some musicality.
realistic, yeah, some,
Yeah.
he's and or maybe Eddie Pearson with, I don't know, but
It's really to talk about Voodie for a second. When I thought about American Music Club, when I w- before we started backtracking the band, right? Just kind of I would cast back and remember the band. I I never thought of them as a band that had technically excellent musicians. Right, like,
yeah, yeah.
none of them. I felt like, they were fine for what they did. I think Bruce Caffin definitely, is, like, a high point, but, like, you don't think of these guys as, like, real, like, axemen, you know what I mean? Um, but
Mhm.
Voodie, as I'm rereading this book again, it talks quite a bit about how Voodie played in these bands prior to hooking up with Eitzel that were much more like Frank Zappa jazz fusion and stuff like that. And so I wonder, like, maybe I just never really considered Voodie heavily enough, and he's just like a total shredder, and he's like really good. I don't know.
I mean, I think his style tends to be more, you know, he goes between like the noise, like he can
Yeah,
make these kind of squalls of noise. It's very tasteful. Like that's always the term I come back to. It's like he has this,
yeah,
his solos and things like don't feel chaotic or like they're about to veer out of control,
yeah.
and not that, like for some reason the guy I think of is Nels Klein, from Wilco,
Okay.
whose role is sometimes similar in that he's creating atmospherics. Nels
Yeah,
Klein, of course, can also, shred and do all the
yeah,
and can make it feel like you're veering out of control and then he pulls it back kind of thing. But Voodie was more like, he was serving the song, like he's
yeah,
trying to find his moments, but he's more about creating like feels more like creating a mood. It's not
yeah.
about technical, like, look at me, like, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, to bring it back to backtracking season 1, I think one of the things that I came away from after backtracking that entire catalog was
Mm,
this really strong sense that I had massively underestimated the impact of Alex Lifeson on that band, really
mm,
until I went back through with Roth and listened to all those albums again and really dug in and talked about it. I think it's so easy in a band like that to get overshadowed by, like, the highly, highly technical drummer and bass player.
yeah.
But gosh, I mean, like, he really is something else, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Technically something else, but really managed to create really interesting atmosphere as well in songs, and to form songs in the way that he approached different parts that he wrote within those songs. It was anyway. I'm starting to already feel as though I'm gonna end up in the same place with Voodie. I mean, already on this album, I've really felt like
Well,
Voodie is really just he does some really interesting shit that I just never really kind of noticed all that much.
this is what, when you're backtracking,
Yeah.
you're digging into all the little dirt and details of every song.
Right. That's right. All right, so listen, are we ready to move on to
Yes.
Broken Glass? All right. Broken Glass, 4 minutes and 25 seconds. Why don't we just dive right on into it? Let's go.
I'll give you the future. I'll give you the past. I'll give you diamonds.
All right. JW. Do you want to dig into the lyrics here first, or do you want to dig into the music?
Well, Neither. What I want to dig into.
Okay. Blue Airplanes.
What
Do you wanna
I
dig into the blue?
what I want to dig into is the complete history of the Blue Airplanes. No. Demo again. This,
Yeah.
I'm sounding like a
Broken
broken
record. A
record
broken
here
record.
with um demos for the at least the ones that are available, like
Yeah.
online. One I heard for the song, again, backing music is a completely different genre. It is not recognizably the same song.
Really.
Most of the lyrics are intact, and some of them are different, and some of them, but the one thing that I was like, oh, chorus for this song, when he says, when he goes to the quiet part and he says, I'll give you
Yeah.
the diamonds, or I'll give you the future, I'll give you the past, I'll give you diamonds. On the
Yes.
original demo, there's a rhyming next
Yes.
line,
Yes.
I'll give you broken glass. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's why the
Yeah.
song's called Broken Glass. Because I don't think, does it say broken glass anywhere else?
No, all right. So listen, I'm so glad you brought this up. This is one of the most interesting things about this specific track that I read in the Sean Body book. And he talks about this. He cites this as kind of a good encapsulation of what would end up becoming an increasingly problematic relationship between Tom Mallon and the rest of the band. So they were recording this song, and Mallon just said to Eitzel, I think that last I'll give you broken glass, I think it's trite or whatever. He said, just in a very blunt way, he said he thought it sucked. And while they were recording it, or getting ready to record it, and Eitzel onboarded that feedback, didn't agree with it, but it was just never resolved. So he literally just didn't sing a line because he hadn't come up with a new line. He was listening to Malin enough that he ended up
Yeah, he was trying to follow the advice and
but
tighten the song or
he didn't
whatever.
really believe in it enough that he actually ever made another line for it. So they just leave that line off of the song. I think that's really interesting, especially as they get into more and more tumultuous relationships. It really is kind of this situation where it seems as though there's a lot of kind of the band, Eitzel and the rest of the band were pretty passive when it came to Malin. So maybe passive aggressive, but really just passive. He was aggressive and they were just passive. And
Yeah.
they weren't real happy with some of the things that he was doing, but they were unwilling to challenge him because he was so kind of like volatile and because he had put so much into the band and was,
Yeah.
their label head and was recording him and all this other stuff. But
Yeah.
I think this is maybe in that the loss of that lyric is
It's symbolic of
the
something.
it
Yeah.
is symbolic of something, especially because in my opinion, that is like the line that makes the lyric. Yes, it is a little I get in some ways I get the criticism that Malin is making. I can understand how a person might say that,
Yeah.
but it is almost this is an example of those kind of Bacharach, like more song stylings, right? That I think Eitzel really goes deeply in the direction of later in his career, with great success. And
Mm.
I think this would be a better song if that line were in it, frankly. I think the chorus sounds kind of weirdly dangling at the end and not kind of in a cool way. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thing that you ID'd. I read about this issue as well, and it somehow,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'm interesting just to hear all of that because I haven't read the
Yeah.
book. So I didn't know that whole backstory about why that
I
lyric was
listened to the
missing.
demo. So,
But the thing that is crazy,
yeah.
again, if you go back and listen to that demo, it is not
Totally.
recognizably the same song. And you
Yeah.
know how we were just talking about Voodie and like the tasteful,
Yeah.
just popping up like at the right spot. And And the version of Broken Glass that's on that demo, it is like this super hard rock sounding rant. It sounds like Billy Squier, The Stroke. Like it's got that kind of vibe to it, like
Really?
stroke it, stroke. Yeah, like it's like coming like and I assume it's
Wow.
Voodie is just shredding throughout like the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, and it sounds
Understood.
like it's so like I mean this, the version on the album is way different. Like a completely different piece of music.
Wow. Well, that's yeah, this is the song itself, the version that's on the album. This is I know that I've kind of hinted around that there's this kind of new wavy thing and the 80s production style and all the reverb and all that. This is the one that struck me that way the most on the entire album. And it just I again, you know this band much better than I do, but when I heard this, I was like, "Oh, Echo and the Bunnymen." This just like reminded
Yeah,
me so much
well,
of Bunnymen.
you know, the thing about the version that's on the album is it does have like like kind of a proto shoegazy
Yeah,
of
yeah,
guitar kind of effect going on it. Like here, I don't know, like what shoegaze band you want to pick that could like do a cover of this song and the atmosphere would be
yeah,
similar, like
yeah,
um so this is also in a way not a direction not taken because they do bring a lot of that atmosphere with them, going forward, but
yeah,
almost sounds like a stadium, like epic,
yeah,
or like Beach House, the band Beach House. If you
yeah,
like,
I do,
that's what
yeah,
this reminds me of. It's like you could almost hear this as like pumping from like big stadium
yeah.
speaker kind of thing. Um, yeah, again, like totally different from the demo.
Alright, so do you wanna move on to Hold On to Your Love?
Yeah.
We're within sight. We are within
Mhm.
sight at the end of this album.
Well, technically, this is the end of the album. Hold On to Your
Okay,
Love is the original final track.
but we're gonna include the 3 bonus tracks, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
we
So
we
Hold
have
On
to.
to
We have to.
this is the end of the original pressing of the album.
Right.
Um,
I will point
knowing
out,
that
I don't, I told you that this vinyl that I have of Restless Stranger was from a college radio station
yeah,
that shall
yeah,
remain nameless. But I told you how they had crossed out Mr. Lucky,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
they have a couple stars next to a few songs. The only song that gets 2 stars is Broken Glass.
Really?
So
Yeah.
whatever DJ at that station was like, that's the one. That's the hit.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
they were wrong. Whoever that person is was wrong. Wrong again. Okay, so Hold
Yeah.
On to Your Love. This is the end of the original pressing of the album. We are going to go on because we go deep. We go
Yeah.
so deep. But this is the end of the original pressing. Hold On to Your Love. 2 minutes and 21 seconds. Take it away, boys.
Hold on to your love, though it's only words and they won't stay. Hold on to your love, though it's just a railing on a balcony.
All right. This is
You
a
should have said
classic-
take it away, boy, because it's kind of just like almost like a solo song.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. Um, this is a classic Eitzel lyric, I think. This really is kind of like, if you want the to distill kind of a lot of Eitzel lyrics down, you've got a lyric like this. It is a plea for love, either specifically or generically, as the only thing to save a person from the unrelenting awfulness of life. Okay? With a slight acknowledgement that maybe love won't be enough to save them from the unrelenting awfulness of life. But that is really, I think there's just a lot of Eitzel lyrics that follow roughly that kind of thematic
Yeah, and
approach.
this feels very much like, because Eitzel throughout the AMC run would do solo performances where it was
Yeah.
just him and the guitar, and this feels like from that. And this is also a song that dates back. Like this one was on the Mean Mark Eitzel Gets Fat tape. He left Columbus.
Yeah.
So,
You
but
know,
again, the version that's on there sounds completely different. It's like different music altogether. Like you
yeah,
should
I
check
mean,
it
look,
out.
this one, I think lyrically it really benefits from simplicity. These are some of the only lyrics on this album that I feel like have been edited or have been honed. Um, I don't think they're, amazing relative to some of the later lyrics that he does, but these lyrics I do just think benefit from brevity, simplicity, and some focus. And I would say the exact same thing about the music. My personal opinion here is you get that soft Mark Eitzel vocal tone in the beginning of this song, and it's just beautiful. You know what I mean? I really like when he uses that tone in his voice, and especially when he goes from that into the more kind of caterwauling, really emotive,
Yeah.
scream it out kind of stuff. I love that juxtaposition and that progression in songs, and I think this is the only place you hear that soft, sweeter voice, and you
Mhm.
also have a little less reverb. So for me, I just felt like, gosh, this is a song that was a simple song that felt concise, felt well focused, and they did not try to do much with it. And I think it really benefits from that much more simplistic approach. Do you believe it? Do you buy that? Do you believe
Well,
my take? Do you agree with my take?
it's making me think, okay, which is a
Okay.
good thing.
Okay.
Um, because you won't like my 10-track Jay Williams 10-track version of The Restless Stranger, because this song
That's
in
not
my
good.
version doesn't make the cut. And
Wow.
and
Amazing.
and again, it's not because I don't like the song. It's because in my version of the album, I'm trying to kind of like make it more cohesive from front to back.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and this song, it stands out because of the contrast, because it's so soft and gentle.
Yeah.
But to your point, like the magic of Eitzel, right, is that he can go from that really like soft and sweet and
Yeah.
sound to the caterwauling, like
Yeah.
big performance,
Yeah.
So, you know, you kind of do need, you got to represent all of that, to
Yeah.
have like the full AMC experience, I guess. So, you're making me rethink it. As the final song on the album, good. I mean, I guess to me this feels a little more like Eitzel solo, like versus like rest of the
Yeah.
band really being, but that was a choice that I'm sure they argued, because on
Yeah.
the original demo for it, it does have like it actually sounds like somebody tapping their fingers to
Oh,
kind of
really?
keep a beat, probably for like 3 minutes, and then he like recorded it. It's like that lo-fi, but it's a little faster, and so I
Yeah.
think this version is better than that version, but I don't know, like maybe because like side B of this album is dominated by the big 80s influence, production
Yeah.
sound, big
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah.
It reminds me in some ways of the band The Waterboys.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
their whole thing when they first came out was this concept called big music. And it was basically like that big echoing, like can fill stadiums sort of sound. And
Yeah.
they're Irish, and U2, kind of
Yeah.
embraced that, and they put out big music, big emotions,
Yeah.
you know.
I
And
is there a better example of that aesthetic than, of course, the band Big Country?
oh yeah, totally. Like
Yeah.
glorious, like, and so like when
Yeah.
I hear like some of the songs on the second side of this album, like it feels
Yeah.
like that's sort of like what
Huh.
they're going for. Then
Really?
it's undercut by Smile and Hold On to Your Love.
Yeah.
But I'm I'm backtracking
Well,
on whether Heavenly Love or Hold
no, I
On to Your
mean,
Love should be on the Jay William version of the album, which
well,
is
I
the
mean,
most
listen,
critical point that I need to
I
make.
think I think everyone's gonna wanna see the track list for that.
Oh, for sure.
I do think that, it highlights your struggle with this highlights, I mean, what a challenging album this probably
Mhm.
was to produce and track, right? Because I just
Yeah.
don't I don't know, I mean, it just
They
is it's a scattered album.
they
There's no other way to say it.
and as evidenced by the demos, there were other directions that they could have gone in
Yeah,
sonically. There were other styles that they toyed with and tried to see if they could do something with, which were vastly different, from where
yeah,
they sort of wound up going. So I think this album was definitely probably a huge bear to kind of wrestle into, something
yeah,
that they felt was releasable. And that probably explains why, they have been kind of when they talk about this album as part of their
yeah,
discography.
yeah. Alright, so is it time for us to move on then to the bonus tracks and hit on Restless
Mhm,
Stranger? The
mhm.
eponymous song that, of course, was not included on the original track listing. It is 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Why don't we dig right in?
You can dream about the dead as they walk through the night with their sweet kisses wrapped in rose-colored pillows.
Okay, so this one,
Lights come on
Jay William,
Mhm.
is an example lyrically, I'm talking about the lyrics here. This is an example of the opposite of what I was talking about on the last track, Hold On to Your Love. I was saying that those lyrics felt edited, felt honed to me. These lyrics feel specifically unedited and unhoned. They feel unfocused. Um, I just don't I think there's more lyric in here than is justified, and it's just not a great
Oh,
lyric.
I was gonna ask, in your opinion, does this sound like it's a drum machine on this
You
song?
know, getting into the music, it didn't strike me as a drum machine, but I'll tell you what it did remind me of immediately, The Strokes. I was
Oh,
just like, "Oh my god,
yeah,
this sounds so much like The Strokes." Yeah, it has that, but, I can definitely I think it is a live drummer. I could be wrong about that. I think
okay.
it's a live drummer, but it definitely has that. Again, the Strokes had, on that first album, Is This It? There are actually a bunch of songs on that that sound as though, there there's a drum machine, and I believe there may be 1 or 2 tracks where there is a live drummer with a drum machine, at least
Mm,
in part of it on that album. In any case, I'm going way off into the Strokes here, but
yeah.
yeah, it has this very kind of I don't know what you'd call that. I called it 1980s New York new wave or punk kind of I don't know what that was, but that thing.
Well, this is definitely you can tell just from the sound and the style of this song that this is a remnant from those early demos kind of period. Like they
Yeah.
were trying on different hats, trying on, different sounds, and this is definitely the Mark Eitzel's mad preacher out screaming his poetry, and we're just
Yeah.
like jamming hard behind him, like that to me is kind of what, and they were kind of like there's something here, but they weren't, they
Yeah.
couldn't hone it to get it into like song structure or whatever. It was more just like
Yeah.
because it's pretty relentless, like just the
Yeah.
it just kind of goes, but I guess it does have those breakdown parts in it. But yeah,
Yeah,
this is
I
sort of like free form poetry kind of rant.
Totally. I mean, this is 2 chords. I think this whole song is 2 chords. But I will say, speaking about those breakdowns that you just mentioned, I felt like the breakdown that's at 1 minute and 10 seconds is one of the better, if not the best element of the song, period. I mean, that was the
Oh,
most interest
well,
to
that
me.
has the kind of like the boom, 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 boom. But doesn't it have like a bass line kind of like that kind
Yeah.
of pops out right there? Like, again, like, it's almost dancey in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And, and I think like a lot of those demos that they were doing, they were toying with these different like up tempo dance kind of sounds. And so it's just sort of ironic, that ultimately the direction the band pulled was not up tempo dance, kind of,
Yeah.
because they tried so many different ways to work that in. And, I think this is a remnant of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to me that this is kind of an alternate track on the album. I don't think this is, again, I mean, we're going back to this, how do you actually sequence and how do you hone this record if you were to do it? I don't I actually felt like this song is somehow more coherent than many other songs on this album, and is definitely indicative of, kind of an alternate universe American Music Club that goes in a different direction. So I mean, I it is anomalous knowing what we know about the entire catalog, but in the moment, if all I knew of American Music Club was these songs that they recorded, I think it's one of the better songs on the album. I mean, I would say it's top 50% probably. I mean, it's not at the top of my list for sure, but I think there are other songs I would leave off the album before this one.
Maybe, I
Mhm.
don't know. This didn't make my
Hmm.
10 track cut
Okay.
either,
All right.
but I
All right.
think mainly because of probably just the way it was recorded. Like, it sounds more like a demo. But,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the title, like, this was the title track, of the album. It didn't make the final cut of the album, but the album ended up like, so there had to be some sort of reason, that this was the title track. Like, was this a particularly important song to them, or was it
Yeah.
just like they were trying to think of a title for the album and were like, well, let's look through the lyrics, and that could work, and like they use Restless
Yeah.
Stranger as the album title. um yeah, this one to me, they had their sections, they had figured out what they were going to do, but it felt like, the vocal never could get tied into, like, the music is trying to put it into a pop structure, but the vocals still kind of just
Yeah.
meandering, and maybe that's why they didn't. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's more rockin',
It is. It
than
is for
a
sure.
lot of the album. So
It is for sure. All right,
yeah.
listen, why don't we move on to How Low? This is the penultimate track we're gonna cover. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Why don't we just give it a quick little listen? All right, so again, I got some weird mom vibes in these lyrics for a bit, and then kind of switched to a lover, but a couple of little gems, turns of phrase in here. The one that kind of I liked was, "Why didn't you tell this child how low he has to fall?" So I think there are some nice evocative phrases in here, but nothing about these lyrics that really kind of, again, they just kind of feel as though they need to be honed and really workshopped
Yeah.
a bit.
I mean, my guess is that this was also probably like, it's the demos. I
Yeah.
mean, just by my count, there's 15 tracks on this version of the album with 3 bonus
Yeah.
tracks. So 12 tracks on the album, 3 bonus tracks. You go to the demos, there's half a dozen or more amongst
Yeah.
those that were never released. Like, they had a lot of different things that
Yeah.
they were trying to kind of hone. And so my guess is
Yeah.
that this particular recording was one of the demos along the way, and then for whatever reason they decided not to kind of finish it. Um it definitely feels more again like Eitzel has a poem. They're
Yeah.
trying to work this poem
Yeah.
over the music and trying to figure out how to make it work, and like just wound up at a
Yeah.
place they weren't satisfied with.
Yeah, now musically, there is one thing in here that struck me, production approach that kind of struck me. It's kind of like a pre-chorus. I'm gonna call it a pre-chorus, but they use that weird vocal effect. It's kind of like singing through a telephone or a megaphone kind of thing in the studio. If you've ever done that, it's a bit
Yeah.
like that sound, which I thought was notable for a couple of reasons. One, that is not something that AMC does much of over the course of their career. There is not a lot of studio chicanery.
Yeah, vocal
Right?
shenanigans.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of they're not a band that I would say does a lot of their creates a lot of their sound in the studio, if that makes sense, right? They're just not a band that
Yeah.
uses the studio in super interesting ways, I think, over the course of their career.
Well, one of the things about Eitzel's voice, so he
Yeah,
has this, very distinct musical voice.
yeah,
And I think in these early periods, I'm guessing that they were trying to figure out what's the best way to record this and present
yeah,
this, because it's not a conventional, um, pop voice or whatever. And I think some early on coming out of that more performance arty kind of thing, like
yeah,
vocals were wild, like he wasn't
yeah,
always kind of like, here's this real strong melody that I'm gonna like nail. It
yeah.
was kind of like, wild
He was
performances. And so I think
yeah,
that, Restless Stranger, you can hear how like on certain songs they're trying to kind of like get it down to like, okay, here's
I
the
know,
melody, like you're sticking
yeah,
right here. Then when you hear him perform live, he goes off in different
yep,
directions,
yep,
with songs. So I think that that's the magic of Eitzel, is that like, you know, his vocal is what enthralls
yeah,
people, you know what I mean? Like, because it is
yeah,
so raw, and it might make you a little uncomfortable and whatever.
yeah,
Like, that's what, really kind of like draws people in. And, so I feel like they were trying to toy with the sound of it, and
yeah,
what if we
yeah,
make it sound like an old time radio or whatever, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And in this song, I think like on this particular recording, like it's a little bit like it goes on, probably longer than it needs to, but I'm sure they were trying to work out arrangements or something and figure out like how do we, you know, craft this into, a final song. Like, I don't think this was meant to be, a final
yeah,
thing. It was probably just like, this is the demo. The one band that this weirdly reminded me of when I was
uh,
listening to it, because it almost has the keyboard sound in this as this like
yeah, yeah.
it's like, and it reminded me of Men Without Hats.
Oh, that's funny. That's really
Like
funny. Okay.
like Men Without Hats, their first, or I don't know if it's their first album, the one with Safety Dance on it, but that was like one of my big like 80s albums that I loved. And there's something about the keyboard sound of that album
Yeah.
reminds me of this track in particular.
Yeah, yeah. They talk a little bit in the book about how on this first album, how they kind of struggled with trying to figure out how to really find keyboard sounds that they didn't think were cheesy sounding.
Yeah.
And that kind of that continues until the keyboardist exits the band.
Mm.
Um all right, last thing I gotta mention about this song, and I'm gonna mention it because anybody who listened to Backtracking season 1 knows how I feel about fade outs on songs. Okay? They understand that a fade out of a song is a cop out. You write the end of a song. You don't just kind of, it's like, you don't, when you're writing JW, you've got children. You've got some
Right,
children there
right.
in school, right?
Progeny.
If
Yeah.
if they if they were writing an essay for history class, they wouldn't just kind of slowly, like in the last few pages, keep getting darker and darker until you just can't read the text on it anymore. That is the writing version of a fade out. And I'm saying that a fade out is almost never the right choice in a song. Um, they did one on this song, and I want to make sure that the few people who are following us from the Rush season to this season understand that I wasn't beating up Rush unfairly. This is a generalized issue
This
that I
is
have.
a deep-seated issue that you have with fade outs. I don't share this anger about fade outs necessarily. I think there are two types of fade outs.
Yeah.
There is the fade out where, you know, we just kept on jamming and going in the studio because it felt good, and we just kept going and going and going and going and going, and then like afterwards we're like, we should probably fade it out about, at the 3-minute mark or whatever. But then I think there are like effective uses of a fade out, like where like,
Okay.
you have a lingering mood. You have like you've reached whatever the mood that you want to leave the listener with, and you can like slowly like, you know, it can be done well is my
I
counter
I
argument.
well, I hear what you're saying. I want you to produce for me a song that fades out that would be not right now. You can listen. This is homework. You can go find it that fades out, and the fade out is a better ending than some other ending that might exist for the song.
Can think of one right now. And again, this isn't like I'm not trying to make a comparison between American Music Club's unreleased East Side to their debut
Yeah.
album, but like
Yeah.
talk. So
Okay.
they're
Okay. I've seen this coming. You and Talk. All right.
I know
Go ahead.
you do we're gonna get into all the little crevices and all my little
Okay.
so
So Talk.
so on their final album, Laughing Stock, which I think was 91,
Mm-hmm.
the final track on the album, kind of like evaporates into this almost kind of ambient, dreamy, and it's definitely like, well, I say in my mind, it's
Yeah.
definitely a long, slow fade out, and to me, it's like it's essential. Like they couldn't
Yeah.
have ended it a better way. But, to your point, I do think a lot of times a fade out can be a cop out, but which would you rather? Like
I
listen
would
to the
rather people.
original,
I would
di-
rather. No, no, no. What
or
I'm saying is.
listen to the track fall apart, because that's
No,
often how it ends
what I'm
too.
saying is when you're writing a song, you gotta write the end of the song in the same way you gotta write the
Mm,
beginning of the song, you know?
mm.
And so I get it. I'm not saying that I wanna listen to you just jam on the verse, like, just repeat this verse forever and, well,
We're gonna
like,
fade
that's
it. Don't worry.
yeah, like, that's not I don't wanna hear that either. I want you to kinda say, "Okay, from the verse, we're gonna go in and we're gonna do this and blah," or, we're gonna end the song somehow. Um,
Yeah, that
so
that
listen,
that's songwriting 201. Songwriting
I
101 is
I'm just
just
saying,
jam and then we'll fade it out.
I am sure that there are some great fade outs, but I
I think
I will go and listen to this
I think
um,
especially for an album closer, I think it can be a very beautiful, effective way to close an album, like the long, slow march, out to silence kind of thing. Like, because
mm.
it's, if you're spinning it on vinyl or whatever, and it like, it slowly fades out, and then you've just got the snap,
So
silent crackle of the vinyl.
there are things I'm gonna try to argue your side of the point. Um, I am gonna take us back. Okay.
We're already back, and so you're gonna take us back further?
I am gonna take us back to a song that I will argue has a kind of a fade out that I think is effective.
Mm.
The year 1996, the album Vernon Yard.
Acetone.
No,
It's
Low. This is
oh,
Low. The
okay.
curtain hits the cast is the album. The song is Do You Know How to Waltz?
Oh yeah. I
Now,
mean,
beautiful
that's all.
song, but
Yeah.
it isn't a normal fade out, right? I mean, their playing fades out, but it crossfades into this like more kind of orchestral thing that happens for a while. But listen, we're sidetracking, we're not backtracking. We've got to get back on track. We got to get back on track to backtrack
We
to
gotta get back on
backtrack.
backtracking. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just leave the fade out with that and
Okay.
move it to the final track we're gonna
We'll
cover.
we'll keep track going forward of how many fade outs we
We
encounter.
will. Oh, I will point them out on every song, and if I
Okay,
find
well,
one in the AMC catalog that I think is good, I'll point. But I'm gonna when they're bad, I'm gonna. You can believe. You can believe I'm gonna call it out.
listen, we're not being paid. We're not paid shills for the AMC mob. We're here to
No.
tell the truth.
Yeah, I
Our
mean,
own
listen.
personal truths.
Too many podcasters are on the payroll of the fucking mixer slider companies
That's right.
saying how much they love fade outs. You
Listen,
know, oh, you
I'm
can
not
do a fade
sitting
out
here
too if
like,
you got this mixer.
"Oh, Mark Eitzel's a great songwriter. Give me my rubles." I'm not here for that. You know what I mean?
All right, listen. Final track, I'm in Heaven Now, 3 minutes and
Yeah.
51 seconds. This
Yeah.
is going to be the end of this debut album, so let's give it a really deep, close listen.
I'm in heaven now. It's the theme park of my dreams. We line up to get in. I feel nothing. I'm in heaven now. Once more I fucked it up. Once more I fucked it up. But I feel nothing.
Okay. JW, tell me, what is it that you want to say about this track?
So, not to give it away, but in Jay Williams' 10-song version of this album, this
Yeah.
is the closing track. This
Yeah.
song, I'm sure was alive. It brought down the house, I'm sure. Like,
Yeah.
or at least
Yeah.
you can feel the potential,
Yeah.
for this song
Yeah.
to really like this taps into the more like, big performance. Like it builds, it has, Voodie gets to squall, like a hurricane coming,
Yeah.
like, and could I might be, does this one fade out? Does this fade out like when
Yeah.
it's reaching its sonic like do do it's doing the big like do 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 and it gets big and I think it like kind of like fades out on that but the
Yeah.
mood that it leaves you with is much more
Yeah.
like to me it's much more like powerful evocative versus Hold On to Your
Yeah.
Love which is like soft and sweet and so
Huh.
I mean, that's a big choice when you're sequencing an album. Like, what's
Yeah.
the final song gonna be that's
Yeah.
gonna be the last impression? And to me, I felt like this one probably brought thunder of their live performance.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's my take on it.
Okay, well, but I think that take is mostly wrong. I will tell you what I I will tell you what I agree with though. Um I don't love this song. I just
Mhm.
don't. But I do appreciate it as an album closer. Especially and again, I don't know what your track listing would be, but if you just deal with the track listing that includes this song, the bonus tracks, I especially appreciate it when it's considered as a bookend to Room Above the Club, which is just so straight, clean, and constrained, right?
Mhm.
This song in some ways feels like, the pressure's been released. Um, and I think it can be effective to end an album that way. But I will say, aside from that, it is clearly evocative, and probably predictive of the very few kind of rock outs that they have in the later catalog. I'm thinking of songs like "Hello Amsterdam," for example.
Mhm.
This is really a Voodie guitar song. He has this interesting, almost Dick Dale sound to his guitar and his guitar
Yeah.
playing, and it it is I actually really love the guitar sound. What I hate, though, is the mix. This is one of the most poorly mixed songs I think I've ever heard. It is Voodie's guitar is way too high in the mix. The percussion on this track is a disaster, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I
Mm.
think that probably what happened is the drummer, during that more freak out section towards the end, got lost. They didn't have a good take. He wasn't playing right. So if you listen to it, the drums, like drum set, is exceptionally low in the mix. It gets even lower, and it sounds to me as though they put in another track of tambourine, and I suspect they did that tambourine just to kind of keep,
Keep the cross
keep
faded up, bring the drums down, keep the tambourine up. Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. I think that that's kind of what had to happen. So I am not. I feel like you're a bigger fan of this song than I am.
Maybe it's more the potential for the song versus this actual recording.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I love on this one, you really feel the band,
yes, you
like
do,
the
and you feel
energy
the
is
energy.
like the band is all bringing it, and Eitzel goes, ends up soaring up
Yeah,
to and it's like, I'm in
yeah,
heaven now. Like it's a
yeah,
big statement,
yeah, yeah.
and so I just feel there's something like kind of evocative about it that they could have ended the album on this like big, powerful kind of note. I mean, again, this is almost like we're getting into Springsteen,
I know.
country.
No, it's funny that you bring up the Springsteen thing, because I don't think I ever would have connected American Music Club and Springsteen, but there is undeniably like a some similarity between these two
Yeah.
bands, actually, you know?
Yeah, it's like, as opposed to Springsteen's narrators that are, because I feel like both of them have
Yeah,
characters or like sort of a personas that sort of like come through different songs.
yeah,
Springsteen's, a lot of them are, kind of working class, like down on their luck.
sure.
It's coming from more of like blue collar type of place, and Eitzel's are
Yeah,
more coming from like really early on. It's like, the bars,
sure,
the
of course.
dark
The
side of the
bar
street kind
Yep,
of,
yep. He
um,
comes from more of a Tom Waits direction than Springsteen, in terms of, like, the characters that inhabit his songs.
yeah, yeah, it has a little bit more of a not a carnival. I mean, Tom Waits has like the carnivals kind of
Yeah.
vibe to him, I wouldn't quite go that far, but it's the drunks and the
Yep.
prostitutes and
Yeah, exactly.
the
Well,
that side of the city,
yeah, for
and
sure.
Springsteen's is more, it feels more like, the working class Americans, sitting around the kitchen
Well,
table,
I mean,
and that's I mean, obviously I'm simplifying both.
I mean, listen, I think in terms of the lyrical content and that what you were just saying, the characters that kind of inhabit his songs, Eitzel's songs, there's definitely this Bukowski influence that you find, that I think is something that he that you know has been talked about quite a bit in his writing, his approach as a writer, and
Mm,
his kind of the again, the characters and the scenarios that he tends to explore. There's very much that. I think there is actually a lot of similarity there, right?
yeah.
Um, but All right. So listen, I
Listening.
think it's time. I think it's time that we bring this thing in. We just bring it right in for a landing. But this is the first time that you're going to face this, JW. But it is time for you to tell us and tell all of the listeners, everybody out there who's listening and they've been waiting. They want to know, what is the best song on The Restless Stranger? Not the demos, not the potential.
You know me.
No, and America wants to know, what is the song?
In my opinion, if
Yeah.
you were going to recommend one song off of this album for somebody to go
Yeah.
and listen to,
Yes.
and I can already feel your scorn is like, it's like crawling up from your gut, like it's coming up.
I've
It's
made
about
no
to.
judgment. I haven't made a judgment. Listen,
Scorn.
listen, there's a right answer here. I mean, there's a correct answer, but go ahead. Give us. Sometimes people get it wrong, and that's all right.
My pick to appeal to most listeners is the same as the band's pick. It's track 1, Room Above the Club.
Wow. Well, that's certainly the safe choice. That is the safe choice. Now, it's the wrong choice. It is
Okay.
the wrong choice, but no one's going to mock you for picking that song. That's, any nincompoop is going to come along and say that's the best track.
Hey,
on the album.
listen, whatever process this album went through, and we've talked about, just
Yeah.
all the varying stuff and probably trying to pick and choose and figure out which
That's
songs
right.
they're going to present. The song that the band themselves settled on
For the
is always
first track.
it's track 1. It's album 1, track 1. This is the first thing that anybody's going to hear if they're introduced to this band, of the club. And I agree that was the safest, yes, but also the best pick.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I think that's a reasonable pick. It isn't the correct pick. I will share with you what the correct pick is right
Please.
now. JW, the best song on The Restless Stranger is Hold On to Your Love. It is Hold On to Your Love. Why is it Hold On to Your Love? Because this is the most fully formed song. This is the song on which they've most successfully achieved a cohesive whole. It is not the most indicative of where American Music Club is going to go. It is certainly not indicative of the rest of this album. I wouldn't put this song among Eitzel's best songs ever. But I think it is without a doubt the most fully realized and perfected song that appears on their debut album. Now, there's another question, and that is, what is the worst song on The Restless Stranger?
Oh,
J. William Hall, please tell us. Maybe you can reclaim your expertise, your crown, by getting this one correct.
in my opinion, and I don't think this is going to be a controversial opinion, Mr. Lucky is the weakest track. As I said when we talked about it, I bet it brought the house down live sometimes.
Yeah.
But like it's one of those ones that just didn't translate, and it also was abrupt and weird, like next to the songs around it, and that's the one that I would cut first.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm happy to report that you have successfully identified the worst song on the album. It is, in fact, Mr. Lucky. So
Now let me ask you this.
Yes.
I have a question for you. You've been asking all these questions. I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
How often in season 1 of Backtracking, not that I haven't listened to every episode, but how often did you and Rafi
over
agree?
50 hours of podcast delight over the course of that season. But
wonderful things. How often did you and Rafi agree on your favorite track on an album and your least favorite?
I don't have that data, but you can, of course, find. I have posted in the Rush subreddit for our season finale, we took all of the favorites and least favorites, put them into a double elimination bracket, and then worked our way through those brackets. So you can see all of the various most favorite and least favorite songs, and you can compare Rafi's and my picks. I would say that it was not uncommon for us to agree. I would say
All
that
right.
we agreed on one of the songs, either the best or the worst songs. We agreed on that probably 70% of the time, 70 to
Oh,
80% of the time. Yeah. So we usually agreed, like we did today, right? We usually either agreed on the worst or the best. One of the more, I think, wonderful things that happened over the course of the season that I would hope, and I'm interested to see if this is something that we experience. A number of times, one or the other of us came to that question with something written down in our notes, and we changed our mind based on the other person's defense
mm,
or discussion of the songs on the album. That happened probably 10 times over the course of the season 1. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something that you and I experience.
all right, all right. So the moment everyone's been waiting for,
Yeah.
Jay Williams revised track
Okay.
version of The Restless
Okay.
Stranger. Okay.
Okay. All
Should
right.
I just rattle them off?
Just rattle them off. Rattle
All
them
right,
off,
track.
and then I'll put him in the I'll put it in the show notes as well in case anybody really wants to dig deep on that.
Yeah, if you want to, come at me with it, that's fine.
Sure.
Room Above the Club, track 1, opening track. Song.
Yeah.
Great opening track.
Okay.
$1 Million Song doesn't make the cut. Track
Okay.
2, Away Down My Street. We go right to the gloom. We introduce the gloom mood.
Okay.
Track 3, Yvonne Gets Dumped. Evocative, keeps that mood going. Track
Yeah.
4, Point of Desire, which was originally the end of side 1, but this is going to be track 4 in this revised version.
Okay.
Track 5 is the one that I've had the hardest time deciding on, but I think I'm going to go with the up-tempo rock version of Heavenly Smile. The CCR Chuglin version. It's still going to be a weird. That's going to be the one weird left
Okay.
turn.
All
Okay.
right. All right.
Flip the record. Opening track of side 2, Goodbye Reprise number 54. Same as on the original album, Perfect. Next
Okay.
track, Tell Yourself, but keeping it the
Yeah.
same. Next track, When Your Love Is Gone. Strong 3. Here we go. Heavenly Smile, the Hee Haw version, it's gone. It's a
Yeah.
B-side.
Okay. All right.
Track 4 of side 2, Broken Glass.
Yep.
And the song that ends the album, I'm in Heaven Now. That
Okay.
is the revised.
Wow.
I think it's tighter. I think it's more indicative of the direction that the band goes
Yeah.
in the future. But having said that, I think this album is always going to stand apart from the rest of the catalog primarily because of that keyboard sound, like that.
Yeah.
It's really something that they ditch
It-
after this album.
so it's interesting after again, to talk about Rush here for a second. So Rush, when we covered Rush last season, Rush's first album, I don't know, Jay William, if you've ever heard their first album, but their first album was recorded before Neil Peart joined the band.
Right. Different drummer. Yeah.
Which substantially changed the sound of the band because he is such a technician. Now, I thought going into kind of doing the first few albums on backtracking Rush, that I would feel the same way about Rush's debut album, that it really stood apart from their next couple of albums, their next album being Fly By Night. I feel the same way with The Restless Stranger right now, but I'm kind of curious to know whether I'm going to have the same reaction next week when we talk about their second album, which is, of course, Engine. So we're going to cover Engine next week. It's going to be very interesting to see if we still feel the same way, or if we'll see a little bit more of a less of a hard break and more of a kind of an evolution into what they're doing on Engine. But you will find that out. I will find that out. We all will find that out next week when we dig into Engine. Jay William, do you want to tell them what they should do and how they should get in touch with us?
So I haven't been as involved in the administration.
Okay. All right.
I don't know.
Oh, you know. Listen, what do we need to?
We're on Reddit. We're on the Reddit.
We are on Reddit. And what's our username on Reddit?
It's Backtracking Rocks with an X.
Yes, RO. We're on Instagram.
Insta.
Backtracking Rocks RX. We are on Twitter. Backtracking Rocks ROX. Get in contact with us there. But most importantly, most easily, just email us. backtrackingrocksrox@gmail.com. Please go out there. Hit the like button if you like this episode. Hit the share button if you know some American Music Club fan out there who is dying for American Music Club content, or even better, somebody who never heard of American Music Club, and you're thinking to yourself, God damn, they need to be exposed to this band, and they need to be exposed to this band in an excruciatingly long, lugubrious way.
Right way.
Yeah. So hit the share, hit the like, just do all of that stuff. Give us a review, for God's sake. We are carrying a perfect 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Apple iTunes. So go in there, write us a review, 5 stars. It's got to be 5 stars. If it's less than 5 stars, you got to go
ahead and write us a 5-star review.
Yes, just you write us a review as long as it is 5 stars.
Here's how many stars. 5, and write the review.
That's perfect. All right, Jay William, it was a real pleasure, as always.
Yeah.
To
I
go
look
on
forward
the
to talking about Engine, because Engine might be my favorite American music.
He's making the argument already. I love it. This is going to be exciting. It's going to be evocative. Engine next week. We'll see you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.